friends, this week I wanted to give you a little glimpse into the kind of food that I make over the course of the week. So not just dinners, but also snacks, and these snacks are also used as breakfast for some of the meals. So I'm going to be making several different things in no particular order, and I just wanted to take you along with me and show you a little bit of what goes on in my kitchen over the week. You'll see me using my new grain mill fairly often because I am really enjoying milling my own flour. We are already seeing the health benefits, and I'll have to report back in a few weeks' time when I'm 100% sure. But for now, my boys who have up to now been intolerant or allergic to gluten can actually eat freshly ground wheat flour and even bread made from it. So that's really good news for us. We're really hoping that it's going to continue, and I will be sure to report back in a few weeks' time. This first thing that I'm making is chocolate muffins. So I have milled my own einkorn flour, and to that I'm adding baking powder, salt, honey, vanilla essence, a couple of eggs and some oil. And these will be baked in the oven at 180 degrees for 18 minutes until they're nicely cooked all the way through. And my boys are so happy to have chocolate muffins. They haven't had those in such a long time, and they love chocolate, so these were a real hit. I'm also adding some almond milk and some sourdough starter to this recipe, and you'll see on the blog over the next couple of weeks I'm going to be putting up several muffin recipes. I have come up with a base for a muffin recipe with freshly milled flour that is sourdough and can ferment for as long as you like in the fridge, up to 24 hours. So it makes it really digestible. And it's also completely dairy free because it doesn't have any kind of milk in there at all. So keep your eye out for those recipes, and I'll be sharing them very soon. I wanted to show you this recipe because it's extremely easy to make, very healthy and very delicious. So I am marinating some chicken drumsticks with some soy sauce, some honey and some lemon. And again, over on the blog you will see a post that has got several different marinade ideas on it. So if you're thinking of marinating your meat before you cook it, go and have a look at that post. I will link it in the description box below. It's got some ideas that you may not have thought about, including a soy sauce marinade. And this just helps the meat to stay really tender, to get the flavour all the way through the meat, and it's something that I really enjoy doing, especially for barbecue season, which is coming up really soon. I'm going to make sure that those chicken drumsticks are well coated with the marinade, and then I'm going to leave them for as long as I can. So this day I wasn't being particularly organised. I think I only had time to leave them for about 30 minutes to an hour before I needed to cook them. But if you can leave them longer, then they will just taste even better. You can leave them in the fridge even overnight would be great. And I've heard of some people that like to freeze their meat in the marinade, and I imagine that would make the meat taste even better. Let me know in the comments if you've tried that, because it's something I'm thinking of and I'd love to have your experience. To go with those chicken drumsticks, I'm making a vegetable stir fry with onions, carrots and Chinese cabbage. This is really simple. I'm only adding salt as a flavouring, and it was so tasty. The sweetness of the carrots with the sweetness of the cabbage goes so well with that delicious savoury chicken. When I'm preparing any kind of cabbage, I like to cut it up really thinly and then rinse it off in a colander and put it into the pan while it's still got a little bit of water on it, which helps it to steam while it's frying and gives a really great result. I do this with all different kinds of cabbage and it works every time. Now, I wanted to make this dinner a little bit special, so I decided to cook the rice in coconut milk. I don't do this very often because it does increase the price of the meal significantly, but today I just wanted to give my family a little bit of a treat. So what I'm doing is I'm measuring out 4 volumes of rice, which I'm then going to swill under cold water just to remove a lot of the starch. So I swill it off 3 times. I'll make sure I'm really careful when I'm pouring off the water so I don't send lots of rice down the sink. And then I'm going to add the same volume of coconut milk. So I worked out how many milliliters there were in my little cup, and I did the maths and I worked out that it was about 2.5 cans of coconut milk. So I didn't have a half a can, so I'm just topping it up with water. It doesn't make any difference at all to the flavour. This was amazing. It was such a delicious meal, and that coconut rice just really elevated it. So if you're looking to make a simple but a little bit special dinner during the week, I definitely recommend making coconut milk rice. I'm going to spread these chicken drumsticks out on the sheet pan and cook them in the oven at 180 degrees Celsius for about 30 minutes. Do make sure you check the internal temperature of chicken if you're unsure whether or not it's cooked. It needs to be at 74 degrees Celsius for it to be cooked through. So I'm just serving that with those delicious vegetables and that amazing coconut rice, and it was a real treat. I've been making a lot of quiches recently, and this is one of my absolute favourites. It's sausage and tomato quiche, and I'm starting it the night before because I like to make my own pastry. Now, homemade pastry will really change the flavour of your quiche. If you haven't ever tried it, give it a go. It's not a difficult thing to do. You just need to be a little bit organised. Get it going the night before, or even the morning of the day you want to make it. That would be fine. It just needs to rest in the fridge for at least 30 minutes before you roll it out. I like to make mine sourdough, and I've got a recipe for sourdough pastry over on the blog. I'll link it in the description box below. So I like to make it the night before so that it can sit and ferment in the fridge overnight. And it also makes making dinner the next day a lot easier because the pastry is already made and is ready to be rolled out. You need to take it out of the fridge between 30 minutes and an hour before you're going to roll it. It depends how long it's been in the fridge really, because if it's been in the fridge overnight it'll be really cold, so you might need to let it rest on the counter for an hour first. If you just made it a couple of hours ago, then taking it out 30 minutes before rolling it will probably be fine. So I made 2 different pastry crusts this day because I knew I wanted to make another quiche later on in the week. So the second one is just going to sit in the fridge until I need it. I think the longest I've left a pastry crust in the fridge is probably 4 days, maybe 3. Any longer than that, I imagine it'll be very sour. So this is the next day now, and I'm ready to make my quiche. So I'm rolling out my pastry, and I'm going to blind bake it in the oven at, I think it was at 200 degrees Celsius for about 10 minutes. Now, blind baking means covering it with baking parchment and then pouring in some beans, or in my case lentils. You can also buy ceramic baking beans, which do the trick, and then it'll bake in the oven without browning and without rising, which is exactly what we want when we're making a quiche. I always like to really butter my pie dish very, very well to make sure that the pastry doesn't stick, and I like to prick it with a fork too to prevent any air bubbles forming while it's blind baking. And to make sure that it looks neat, I cut off any extra pastry from the top that's overlapping the top of the dish, and that just helps it to look a little bit better when I pull it out of the oven. So in it goes for about 10 minutes in the oven, and again you'll have a full recipe for this on the blog. I'll link it in the description box below. While that's baking, I'm going to make the filling. So this is a sausage and tomato quiche. I'm using plain pork mince here, and I'm going to season it. If you have sausage meat, you can use that instead, and that will be fine. You might want to add some extra spices or herbs to make it taste the way you want it to, but this is a real blank canvas really. You can add whatever spices and herbs you enjoy. So I'm frying off that meat, and I will add the herbs and spices in a little while. While that's frying, I'm getting together the egg and milk mixture. So I use 4 eggs, 400 milliliters of milk, and a couple of tablespoons of flour to make it a lovely creamy texture. I give it a good whisk to make sure that there's no lumps. Add a little bit of salt. You can also add pepper and nutmeg if you like. And that's just going to sit there until I'm ready to assemble my quiche. So the spices and herbs that I'm adding here are smoked paprika, parsley, thyme, and plenty of garlic. If I'd had fresh garlic, I would have used fresh garlic, but for some reason at the moment I keep forgetting to buy fresh garlic, so powdered it is. And now I'm grating up some cheese. I'm using Comté, which is our favourite cheese, and that goes really well in the quiche. It melts really well and it has a delicious flavour. I like to add the cheese directly to the egg and milk mixture because I find that it really incorporates well into the quiche, whereas if you sprinkle the cheese on the top, it kind of makes the quiche a bit top heavy, and I don't like the texture it leaves it with. So I'm cutting up some tomatoes, and here is my baked pastry crust. Now, in all of my quiche recipes, I like to smother the base of the quiche with mustard, and that just gives an extra kick of flavour and it makes it absolutely delicious. The pork has now finished frying. It's completely cooked through, and I'm going to sprinkle it onto the base of the quiche. Pour the egg, milk and cheese mixture over the top, and then arrange the tomatoes on top of that. And the tomatoes, I've sliced them not too thinly, because otherwise I don't think you'd be able to taste them well enough. So I like to leave them quite thick so we get a really good tomato flavour. And I'm adding salt and pepper on the top of the quiche to flavour those tomatoes. And this is going to cook in the oven at 200 degrees Celsius for about 25 minutes, or until it's golden brown all over. This is an amazing, delicious quiche, and it's one that people aren't used to eating, so if you're having guests over, I think it might be a real treat for them. Now this is later on in the week, and my children have eaten all of the muffins I made earlier on in the week, so here I am making more muffins. This time I'm going to go with a more summery flavour. I'm doing lemon and poppy seed. I'm running a bit late on this day, so I'm getting together all of the wet ingredients while the flour is milling, and then I'll be able to add the flour and the rest of the dry ingredients straight to those wet ingredients and mix it all up really quickly. In goes the flour. This is einkorn flour, so I'm using 2.5 cups. Now, one thing that I have really changed my mind on since I started milling my own flour is I don't like using volumes, because I find it's really difficult. Even with a conversion table, I find it's really difficult to get the right quantities of flour. So I prefer to use metric grams and measure out my wheat berries, and then I know that I've got exactly the amount that I need, and I'm just milling what I need. Here I don't mill too much, so you'll see me in a little while making some starter with the rest of the flour that I didn't use for the muffins. Now, this was a bit of an experiment. I'm not sure I'll be doing it like this again, but I've added the rind of 1 lemon and the juice, and then I'm adding 2 teaspoons of poppy seed. I'm going to be working on this recipe because it wasn't quite lemony enough for my taste. So I think I shall be adding the rind of 2 lemons next time, and I might even turn it into a drizzle cake. Who knows? We'll see. Anyway, it was tasty, and I did enjoy those poppy seeds in there, so I will definitely be doing this again. So as I said before, I had some flour left over, and I'm just adding that to my starter jar. I'm measuring out how much flour there is, and I'm putting the same amount of water. I always use filtered water when I'm making sourdough bread or feeding my starter, because the chlorine in the water here, I find it really inhibits the bacteria from growing. So I prefer to use filtered water. We were running short of sauerkraut, so I'm quickly getting some of that prepped and fermenting so that we can enjoy that again really soon. I've got 3 very small cabbages here. I normally use 1 tablespoon of salt per head of cabbage, but because these are so small, I'm just using 1.5 tablespoons of salt for these 3 heads of cabbage. So I rub the salt into the cabbage and then let it sit. I usually let it sit for 10 minutes, then do some more rubbing, and then let it sit again before I put it into jars. I was in a bit of a rush again this day, so I only rubbed it in once. To be honest, I think it really needs that rubbing in twice to really get the juices going, because I didn't have enough juices. I ended up having to make brine the next day just to make sure that they were completely submerged in liquid. So my recommendation would be to really massage the salt into the cabbage for as long as you can, probably 5 minutes, then leave it for 10 minutes and do the process again. Just massage that cabbage until there's a load of juices coming out of there, and then you'll have enough brine to completely cover the cabbage. Now, dinner on this day is one of my favorites, pork pot roast. And I think I might have said this before, but we get our pork from a farm, so we buy it in bulk, and we have several roasts in the freezer that are just waiting to be cooked, and we love this recipe. It is so delicious. I think it's a real French recipe. I don't think I've ever really seen this kind of thing being done anywhere before. It was one of the very first recipes my mother-in-law made for me, and I just love it. It's delicious. So I'm browning off the meat. I would normally take the meat out and let it sit on the work surface on a plate while I fry off the vegetables, but I'm trying to speed everything up today, so I'm putting it all in there at the same time and hoping for the best. I added some thyme and some garlic and maybe some rosemary too, and some salt. And then I'm going to bring it to the boil. I added some water. I'm going to bring it to the boil and then let it cook in the oven for a good hour and a half. I think I cooked it in there for quite a long time. You need to make sure that the meat is cooked through, but usually after an hour and a half in the oven, it'll be perfect. And I'm serving this with some homemade mashed potato and some broccoli that I just boiled. I try not to boil it for too long so that we get that really vibrant green colour and all the vitamins. And the sauce from the pot roast is just absolutely delicious with those mashed potatoes. Thank you for following along with me today. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you'd like more content like this, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. I make videos on homemade food from scratch, allergy-friendly meal ideas, and lots of sourdough every week. See you next time. Bye!